This is Dave McCain with the Right Tree Genealogy. I'm answering a DNA question today. And that question is, who to DNA test? So many times people have asked me questions on who should I test or what tests are available, those things. Now I've done other videos covering those, and I'll have those at the link at the end of this video. However, the main thing I'm going to cover today is a few things you need to do on who to DNA test. Now, I have created this little spreadsheet here literally just for reference. The question you need to ask yourself is, what do I want to know? So if you have the question in mind, I just want to relate to connecting to family members, just in general, all my branches, that's one question. If you say I'm really pursuing my paternal line, that's another question. And if you're pursuing a very specific question in your maternal line, that's a different question. So you have to decide what your question is. Now with that said, there's a follow-up. Who do you know? Do you have your grandparents still living? Start a list. Create a list of people that you could potentially ask to test. And then another question is, how much is it worth in money? Because a test can range from $40 for a basic test to thousands of dollars depending on if you're doing a whole genome test. So you just got to realize, how much are you willing to spend? Now with that said, I'm going to go into a quick statement here. Follow-up question to number one would be this. What tests are there? Well, there's the ATDNA, or family cousin DNA. There's the Y-DNA, the paternal father DNA. And then there's the mtDNA, which is your mother or maternal line DNA. So those are the three tests that are available. Again, I have another video covering those if you link at the end of this video. And then another thing to look at is which test or test will help with my questions. So as I was stating at the very beginning of this, if you have a broad question that you're looking at here, you want to know information about all of your grandparents, then you take the ATDNA test or your family cousin DNA test. That's Ancestry.com. That is MyHeritage. That's 23andMe. Those type of tests, family tree DNA as well. Now, my recommendation, and I said this in my last video, is I like Ancestry and then transferring the DNA to MyHeritage and family tree DNA, and actually even GEDmatch is another option there. So if you're looking at cousins, if that's what you're looking for, this is what you focus on right here, the ATDNA. If you're just looking to see how you connect to people and starting on your tree and you put it together, and that's how you go there. If your question is specifically focused on a paternal line or your father's line, then the Y-DNA test at a company like Family Tree DNA. Now there's a couple other companies out there. I'm just mentioning Family Tree DNA. It's the one I personally use, and it has the largest database at this time. If you've got a question specifically on the paternal line, that's the path to go. Now on the maternal line or the mtDNA test, again, I have a video specifically covering what these are, but to say you have a situation where you have questions in the family that, you know, this is my grandmother and this is my great-grandmother and this is my great-great-grandmother, and you have someone else that you've talked to and it says, I think this is our great-great-grandmother. Well, or you know someone has tested that you can have test the mtDNA test and you can try to see if you two match. If you match mtDNA exactly, then it's very likely that you have that same maternal line, grandmother, great-grandmother, great-great-great-great, keep going on back on that one. But now if you show differently, that's where, again, your testing will have to be continued and additional research for both sides, because somebody doesn't have the right great or great-great or continuing back grandparent in that line. So the people you should test. First, yourself. And the reason you do that, and I recommend it, is it gives you a baseline of your cousins and relationships. For instance, if you test on Ancestry and you get cousins showing up, then you can start saying, okay, is this mom's side or dad's side? If at all possible, your next thing is parents, is the next people to test. And the reason I say that is then you can start looking at the cousins that show up and how they match to your mom and how they match to your dad, and break those out by each one of those family groups. You will then know, hey, this is my dad's side or this is my mom's side. Number 3, grandparents. Both sides. Now, the reason I say that, again, the fundamental statement here is if the funds are not a question, then this is how you approach it. Then you can, if you have your grandparents, then you are able to break it even further back into each one of those. How they match your parent, how they match you, and how they match the grandparent takes you down the lines. Now, not common, but then the next thing would be great grandparents, okay? And again, you just continue down this path, etc. Okay, so if you're unable to test your parents, your grandparents, or your great-grandparents, obviously that's very possible. The next step is to do the second choice tests, okay? The second choice tests are your parents' siblings. They still have the connection to you. They will match you and match them, and that's how you trace those back. It gives you the benefit of the same parentage of each one of your parents. It's not 100% as good as having your own parents, because your DNA came from your parents. And again, I have other videos covering those, but with it said, in general speaking, you're better off to get your parents' siblings, and that's both sides. And then the next choice, the second choice tests to look at would be your grandparents' siblings, so your great aunts, your great uncles. That's the next step to see, okay, I can still trace that particular line or that particular line or these particular lines with those individuals. Now, going to the last step here, I'm going to say, and I'm going to use a different color here. So the third choice are cousins. Now, cousins relate to any form of cousin. First cousins, second cousins, third cousins. If you're doing a Y-DNA test, this is where the cousinship, this is more important, honestly, for Y-DNA testing. Okay, bigger factor for Y-DNA testing, because when you're testing cousins, and particularly further out cousins, you can start branching your Y-DNA better and see where changes took place. Again, that's an advanced topic. Fundamentally, I just wanted to cover who do you test. So to recap on this, who do you test? Well, you start with yourself and then step backwards. If you have the funds to do so, you step backwards to your parents and then your grandparents on both sides. If your finances are limited, and most people's are, I will say start with ATDNA or cousin DNA, because you can usually get those, particularly around the holidays, and I just put a video out on that recently. The holidays is when you can get them the cheapest. $40 to $50, $60 for a test for the ATDNA at these companies. I'm not sponsored, but I just like Ancestry DNA, and knowing that I can transfer it to the other companies, most of the other companies that I'm interested in. So if you're limited on funds, start with the ATDNA on yourself. And if it's available, then step backwards beyond your parents. If you've just got a certain amount of finances, okay, you start with yourself. And if you've got your grandparents or your grandparents' siblings, that would be the next thing I would do, skipping around a little bit, just so that you're gaining the most knowledge. Remember this, every DNA test that you do is going to gain you more information. You are 50% of your parents, 25% of your grandparents, 12.5% of your great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents is you're about 6.25% of them. So when you're able to test those, you're focusing those in those directions. I hope this video was informative for you. I hope you gained the knowledge of who to test, how to test, and reasons to test, and what type of tests there are. If you need additional information, I have put videos at the top here for more DNA questions. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, click this button here. I do recommend you also click the bell notification if you want future notifications of when videos come out. Let's continue learning together. Thank you.